On today's show, is Facebook in trouble yet again? Talk about Francis Haugen and the whistleblower and the outage and all the algorithm that's not great for teenagers. That's making everybody sad.
Yes. And after that, we're going to talk about the latest developments in pharma, because lots of money is being spent on AI with not a lot of benefit at the moment, but we're all kind of holding our breath, like especially the rich people who want to live forever. So yes, it's hundreds of millions for AI-driven drug development and AI-driven testing as well.
Oh, and we're also talking virtual dogs. Did you know that dogs are used in drug testing? No? Well, you do now. There's a competition going to replace them using machine learning.
All right. I feel like you guys just told the whole story there. I don't even think we need to go into the whole story.
Shut it all down.
Smash that like button. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Tien Fu.
Oh, by the way, this will be our first ever Uncensored episode, so I don't know what's going to happen. So none of us do, actually.
The Tien who edits and carefully crafts our podcast is having a completely undeserved break, so he does not have time to edit this podcast. So anything we say, he will stop censoring my long rants about genocides.
Okay, but before we get into all this, this is a beautiful fall day in New York City. How about you guys?
It's raining.
It's also raining.
It's an average rubbish day in London.
And Max is,
typical
by
day
the
in
looks
London.
of his background, Max is fading in and out of existence.
But that's always the case. That's not just the background. That's like everywhere he goes.
There's this alien structure. I kind of like it, Like it's almost like
it's just a sad gaming chair. Yeah, everybody knows this.
No. Seriously, like I had an interview with somebody, and they legit thought this was the actual background. So I can deceive people with this.
I find that hard to believe.
I find that very hard to believe. So the listeners, he has a Zoom background or Microsoft Teams background that is flicking in and out of reality, like he's being beamed up to the Enterprise. Is terrible. It is an example of AI failing. You have two chairs. You said two chairs. Held your fingers up, and one of your fingers disappeared into another reality. AI sucks. This is one of the most used platforms on something that is a pandemic now that's been going for years, and it still can't differentiate between a hand and a background.
Oh no!
See, when I mentioned uncensored, unedited episode, that's what we're getting into. Like, just
quick cut the feed.
Every opportunity he has to like crap over everything. Okay, so
crap on Microsoft Teams.
Speaking of bad AI, speaking of bad artificial intelligence, Facebook. You might have heard of the outage. You might have experienced it. Apparently, WhatsApp is like a big deal everywhere else other than the United States. So I heard from a lot of international colleagues and my friends were like, "You guys don't know what it means to us when we couldn't do business for like the whole day and the money we lost." I'm like, "Oh, really? Oh, I'm sorry." But that's outage is a whole nother story. But the point is, a whistleblower has came out and collected thousands of pages of documents claiming that Facebook kind of, I guess nobody knows about this, but everybody knows about this, saying that, hey, the algorithm is kind of focused on quote unquote engaged post, meaning that the post that stoked the most emotion. Now Zuckerberg came out and said, why would I create a platform to stoke hatred? And to her credit, the whistleblower, right? So exactly. So she never said he built the platform to stoke hatred. She basically just say, hey, this is a platform that we could have done more to not spread the false information, because the bad information always stoked more. And to Facebook's credit, they have really, really good internal research team, and they researched the heck out of this. So it's the internal...
And then did nothing.
Right.
They keep doing internal research reports where they're like, oh, we're leading to deaths. We're completely causing a whole generation of mental health issues.
13% of the teen girls... 13% of teen girls said that they make Facebook and Instagram make their suicidal thoughts worse. 17% said that they make hate their body image just after like a little bit of time on Instagram. And of course, like Seb was saying, they did nothing. So here we are. Just they're following the British monarch idea. Do nothing.
So here's the thing. It's anyone that is a tech journalist, a tech reader, kind of vaguely interested in Facebook, is not going to be surprised by any of the things the whistleblower said. However, it's proof. It's hard documents, concrete testimony in a legal setting from a Facebook employee, and it also is 60 Minutes, it's Senate hearings. This is a wider audience of people that might have necessarily heard or cared about these previous disclosures. So on the one hand, it's completely passé because we knew all of this, and on the other hand, it's huge news.
But,
right.
2 years ago, we had Zuckerberg in front of Congress, kind of, like trying to answer concerns about like some of the very same issues. And it did not lead anywhere. I don't think it raised awareness.
So I think here's the difference. So New York Times, cleverly point out that this time, I guess, the hearing is the most time she's ever heard the senator saying algorithm over and over. And it's just like, last time wasn't the case. That's some people are trying to figure out. And then that's according to New York Times, they were trying to avoid saying the word algorithm because they don't know what it means. And this time they are more aware, because I think after January 6th, after all the things that's happened in the last year and during the election, people, and I was going to open with like, hey, there's another word to unite the Senate, Mark Zuckerberg, because they seem to get bipartisan support. Now both sides are actually on the same page and saying like, I don't know, we're going to break up Facebook, but something needs to be done.
So the thing is, if you compare it to the previous hearing, that was an election year, and the difference was the focus from the right wing was always about, why have I been censored? Why are there shadow bans? And it was much more just a political theater. How do I get this clip that can be shown on Fox News or be shown by my campaign,
right,
or essentially the same thing. This time, because it was an engineering-led discussion, and every time those kind of talks came along, it was pushed away by Haugen. She went back to, all I know about is how this algorithm has messed with people. But when we talk about the algorithm, we can't embody it as its own thing, that it's just this nebulous entity that we have no control over. This is the creation of human beings at Facebook who intentionally built something. It reacted the way it did. They studied it. They knew how it was interacting with people. They knew what it did to people. And they decided not to do anything about it because engagement was the number one priority.
Yeah.
I think that if you said about the platform wasn't built for hate, we said about that. The nefariousness of the platform was built solely so Mark could rate the girls in his college year. Like,
farm animals.
Nefariousness in the platform dates back to its inception, and the fact that we've gotten to the stage where even your nan thinks that Facebook is bad. Well, no, maybe not that far, but it's getting to a point where the fact that they could turn off their services in the way that happened, and we'll get onto that, caused so much panic, and yet we're talking about, breaking them up, regulating them, but they already own so much, and we'll come on to their other business models as well, because there's some other things coming up more related to AI. But it's crazy how, now that it's not an election year, everything's coming, full force.
No, but it was a 1-2 punch, right? On one hand, we had this people testifying that Facebook is a little bit evil, like in a very traditional sense of the word. On another, because of the outage, we know just how much people rely on Facebook. And again, you said, like, especially around the world, maybe not in the US, but WhatsApp is our lifeline, it's free communications. It's supposed to be encrypted. It sounds good in theory, but obviously, So no one company should have this much power. And it's just like, we kind of forgot about the concept of monopolies. Nobody talks about monopolies anymore. Right. We're surrounded by actual kind of like legal definition of monopolies, and everybody's like, it's technology though. Like this is how everything works. Surely.
Well, me and Max were talking about it I know, obviously, to bring it back to gaming, but this morning off air we were talking about Microsoft. Microsoft recently bought Bethesda, which is a game studio, huge, absolutely ridiculous. Oh yeah, then they can watch it exclusively onto their platform. Another one, Disney. I mean,
and Marvel. Yeah. So none of these deals should have happened. Like the upcoming Nvidia and ARM merger should not happen, but it probably will.
Might not. No, that one at least, it seems they've bitten off a bit much.
Yeah.
So
come on, Seb, give in to your hate.
I'm hoping it fails.
Seb's the voice of reason here.
It brings up like this question of what can be done when you have an entity like Facebook.
Yeah.
And there's the two avenues, or the three avenues. One is just
Lenin.
He sees them.
Before we talk about what can be done, should we talk about what should be done?
Well, here's what can be done, and then you can decide like how which one we should do. Because either you leave it, you go like, okay, whatever. People can make informed decisions. If they read a Facebook post that tells them they should take horse drugs and they decide to, that's on them. Second is break them up. So you split off WhatsApp, split off Instagram, split off Oculus and stuff like that. Make it much harder for Facebook to acquire new startups. And the third is regulation of algorithms. And that is the most difficult one because regulations, A, really struggle to keep up with shifting technologies. B, companies can bog that down in court saying, oh, this is trade secrets, or this is constantly changing, withholding data. And then if America is regulating the algorithm in America, what does the impact have in other countries? We don't know. So it's very uncharted territories.
And the way it works, kind of like in the U.S. government, is when they create a regulator for technology, they're gonna pick and choose, like former executives and people and subject matter experts, and like it's like XtalPi, like sort of regulating FCC, like it's gonna be something like that. It's gonna be a former Microsoft exec regulating Facebook.
You know that the congressman from Idaho isn't gonna know what an algorithm is,
Yeah. Some senator thinks that Google, and Facebook is the same company, right? So, but the thing is, I think I remember a time where Instagram was just like, from the time it show you post from the time they were posted, right? It was just like years ago when I first signed on. I think for like a brief 6 months that when I first had my Instagram, it was like that. It was just like, okay, my friends post this, and later my friends post this. I can go for, chronological order on from the time they posted. That was kind of great, and I think I like Instagram. I miss that Instagram. I don't want to see, hey, this is the most engagement, or we think, I go through Instagram stories sometimes. I watch people practice basketball, like move. I'm terrible basketball player, but I watch them because I want to watch. There's no chance after 2 funny basketball move videos teach you how to do certain moves, it doesn't lead to a TikTok video of a girl reposting their TikTok video on Instagram doing silly dance and stuff. I'm just like, I don't want to watch this, but then they give it to you. They feed it to you. They don't care what I want. They're giving me what I think a guy like me at my age will want, and that's ridiculous.
They've created a hall of mirrors, and they've created this hall of mirrors, and everyone's confused that when you walk into this thing, you see tons of ugly crap, right? It reflects back horror at you, this warped version of your reality, amplified by 1,000 times, and we're so used to it now.
No, but it also doesn't give you the opportunity to curate your feed, which I think was the original idea. And it was the same for Twitter, for example. So when Twitter stepped away from an actual kind of, like an actual timeline, none of those are timelines anymore. They can't be called timelines because, chronological order. That was bad times, and that was the beginning of the end. And Twitter is getting harder to use every day because they're embracing this idea that the algorithm knows better than you. So people had carefully curated, carefully constructed feeds, like that perhaps, like it's related to their work or their interest or their hobbies, and now all of that is out of the window because no matter how much you curate, they're still going to show you crap that you did not select, you probably don't want there, but we decided we're being force-fed content we don't like, and we decided that that's somehow okay. Oh, I'll just scroll past this, and the scroll past is only accelerating and increasing,
Right, and all of a sudden their ads got really good, and I'm like, okay, yes, it's time for me to buy another pair of shoes, and it's just like ridiculous. And I think that's on the, obviously, I guess the micro level that it affects our daily lives. Like, oh shoot, I don't want to do this. So I try to avoid Instagram as much as I can when I'm not traveling, because it's just like when I'm at home, I don't need to post things about my child every now and then. But I think on the global level, and Seb, this is maybe a teaser for you, or to share something you prefer. It creates this global populist movement from all the politicians. And I don't have much evidence. This is kind of my own observation. I do think that the politicians now just pander to post, right? Pander to social media, their algorithm. Now the algorithm, because they stoke emotion. And when you stoke emotion, what the politicians try to stoke emotion, it's just not a good combination, So it created this movement where they're pandering to, you know what, 80% of my country will think this, and they will like this if I say something outrageous. And they will create that will at least put me on top of other politicians who are running for the race or whatever. So it kind of created this movement of like this populist, idea.
I think if you go back like 4 years ago, there was a big movement where brands, when they were just getting onto social media, they were kind of very stoic. They didn't really know what to post, and they started pandering, essentially. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, to their audiences. So Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, all of those are notorious for social media, to the point where actually audiences took notice of this and created a meme called Silence Brand, whereby a crab with laser eyes was blowing them up, and they would put that in the responses. Now, while I like the idea of meme crabbing something to get it to go, that won't work in this instance. I mean, Tien, you were right. The other day I was on Instagram, and for some reason, when you scroll down on the reels, as they're called, I was being advertised counterfeit shoes in India.
Well,
I don't know. How do you stop this?
The thing is, the difficulty is, like the crab anecdote. You are just playing in their game. You're engaging. You're taking part in that, and really beyond government intervention, the only thing one can do is try and disconnect oneself as much as possible, which is easy for, say, Facebook as a social media platform, but like Tien was saying, WhatsApp has become so key and crucial to so many people's lives across the world, and that can have horrible unintended consequences. So I talk about it on pretty much every podcast because it's not covered and thought about enough, which is that there is a genocide in Myanmar that has been
not until now, that is.
Yeah, directly linked to Facebook. Directly, repeatedly, they were warned, they knew that people were dying. The whole population was being shifted out of a country in a genocide because of, well, in part because of their platform, and they did nothing. And to get an idea of kind of the mindset we're up against, I want to talk about another podcast favorite, Eric Schmidt, previous CEO of Google. He traveled to Myanmar with Barack Obama during the kind of heyday of bringing the internet to nations will, quote unquote, civilize them, it will westernize them, it will make them like us. We just bring the internet, let the free market economy of open networks get into their head, and they will all be like us. Of course, that doesn't happen. Every culture is unique. And then you add in this like hyper-addictive platform with very little oversight, and you get genocides. So I was watching an Eric Schmidt webinar the other day, and this is what he said.
As you do.
The vast part of innovation is occurring in private companies. 50 years ago, it was in government labs and universities. It is crucial that tech companies be allowed to go as far as possible. Why don't we wait until something bad happens before we regulate it?
Our lawyers have asked me to read this statement.
And things have happened that are bad. Again and again and again, but no one cares. And maybe it takes a whistleblower, maybe it takes a hearing, maybe it takes an insurrection for people to care, but it still doesn't feel like that.
Apparently it doesn't take an insurrection. An insurrection can happen and we just brush it off and it's business as usual.
Well, it's the same. It's the same with the currently ongoing. The Saudi Arabian investment fund owned by their leader has just purchased Newcastle. He has a 320 billion.
Nobody cares about football.
So
no,
this is not AI.
But it's relevant because the country still beheads adulterers and gays and has been found to have been involved in the murder of a journalist, a colleague. And yet people brush it aside because, like Seb says, it's, people brush things aside and move on.
Yeah.
And
so the whole of Silicon Valley's financial market is completely inflated and massively invested in by Saudi Arabian funds. And to assume that has had no influence on how they operate and how they regulate and whether Google partners with the world's largest oil company, Saudi Aramco, is naive.
So there's four of us here, and all of us are thinking the same thing. The promise of personalization was a lie. So, like, when they pushed algorithms, the idea was that it's actually going to improve the content that it shows you. It's going to show you the content you're more likely to be interested in. And that's more relevant to you.
Right.
And it was sold to you as a good thing. And it sounds as a good thing in theory, but they can't make it work. Basically, instead, what we see is the algorithm constantly appealing to the median, to the common denominator. Instead of personalizing the output, it almost it makes you more mainstream. Oh, everybody likes these things, so you should like them too. And that's dumb. That's not what we signed up for when we started giving information to Facebook. And this organization has profiles on everybody, consisting of several hundred different points, and they can't use that to show me the stuff that I might actually like. And that's surprising.
I think to me the solution is just I would just love for a Instagram version can we just opt out of the algorithm? I don't know if that's possible, but I think to me that's maybe I think breaking up Facebook might be too much for the Congress to take up at this point. Just me being realistic. I don't see. If they do it, I'm glad. And also I don't think it solves the problem because I think it just creates many problems. Now we just have to deal with other companies.
There's going to be 5 Facebooks.
Right. So how is that better? I don't know. But it just just because I watch, and it goes with all algorithms, like Max was saying. Like, just because I watch one murder documentary on Netflix doesn't mean I want to watch all of them all the time. I want to, it's like, okay, once every 6 months I want to pick up like a murder mystery, but that's not the only thing I want to watch. And so I often struggle with this, and I think it's almost like for anybody who are aware of the algorithm, it's like a constant wrestling with the algorithm. Like, you know what? On my YouTube, I always I watch enough Norm Macdonald for the week. I'm gonna just I don't want to see this channel anymore. I shut it off. But if my mind reminds me to see it, I'll watch it again, because I don't need to watch all the John Cleese clips all at once. You have to constantly be aware of what's going on. I have to constantly say I don't want to see this ad because it's working too well for me. So
burn down. So basically, as we saw, Facebook can be taken offline. Unfortunately, currently, the best person at taking Facebook offline is Facebook. I mean, all we can do is, as individuals, is have different platforms. When Facebook went down, 70 million people downloaded Telegram. Don't use something that is bad for you if you don't have to. If you live in a place where WhatsApp's the only option, you got to use WhatsApp. If your grandma is on Facebook and you want to talk to your grandma, use Facebook. But where you can, you have to look at it like not smoking or wearing a seatbelt. It's the best we can do is cling on and hope that we're not too much ruined by an entire structure designed to ruin our minds.
Wait, do you say cling on?
He did. Cling on.
Right. It's like smoking. So, yeah, maybe that's what went through Max's mind when he smoked his first cigarette at age 9.
Yeah, look, there he is.
Cling on this. And
you can't talk about smoking without me lighting up. It's impossible.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. With this cigarette, it's time to talk about some advances in AI for drug development. And again, we're not going to go too deep into this because these are very, very difficult, very complicated matters. These people have brain sizes of planets. But for a gentle introduction, let's talk about virtual dogs and why they're important. Over to you, Ben.
Yes, so many people have pets. I, for one, have a stuffed Pikachu that sits near my webcam. But many of you have dogs. Now, I bet you didn't know that dogs are used in drug testing. Well, legally, in the UK, for example, a drug must be tested on 2 animals. One must be a rodent, so mice or rats. I guess guinea pigs are a rodent as well. I don't know. But also, it has to be tested on a non-rodent. So many things are used, from fish to cows, pigs. I mean, we've got a lot of spare pigs in the UK at the moment. But dogs are one of them. So statistically, I'm reading these here, over the last year, of the 208 million procedures involving live animals, 2,700 were dogs, from a total of 4,300 procedures. That's from the Kennel Club. So the UK National Centre for the Replacement, Refinement and Reduction of Animals in Research, mouthful down to NC3R, basically are offering innovators $3.65 million to create virtual dogs for use in drug testing. Great news for those who, like me, love dogs. So the actual challenge itself is encouraging innovators to develop models using advanced mathematical modeling, machine learning approaches to predict unexpected effects on drugs on human health in order to avoid dogs being used in tests. Personally, just throwing my opinion out here, fantastic, absolutely great. I'm a huge dog person. All I do is follow dog accounts on Twitter. I'd highly recommend looking up the Golden Ratio. They're fantastic. I think this is great. I think it's interesting, and because it's for good, I think you're going to get a lot of interesting innovators come out and work in this space rather than just more drone swarm competitions yet again.
So is the whole segment just us agreeing on not killing dogs is a good thing?
Yes.
Okay, I agree.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg might disagree, but
spot the what's his name, the contrarian. Yeah.
No, I think obviously it's a noble aim. The problem is, if the regulator doesn't accept it, doesn't accept simulated
Right.
stuff, then it's not that helpful. And the difficulty of testing the results against reality. Are they going to have to drug up a bunch of dogs and see if it
Right.
matches the models? That's not ideal.
I guess my question is, how well does it work so far?
Actually, synthetic data in kind of pharma research is a thing, and it's just like, yeah, there's a bunch of startups that again kind of flogging this idea. Now, to me, it has always sounded weird because, like, yeah, if you can simulate living organisms to such degree, you know, like,
Why don't
that's
just
it,
do
we've
human?
solved medicine.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Human Brain Project, ongoing EU project to
Never
simulate
gonna be
parts of the
finished. Yeah.
human. Exactly, it's never going to be finished.
Yeah.
Billions are being sunk into it, and there's just so little we know, and there's so
Right.
many difficulties. Department of Energy have Candle, which is a machine learning program to try and help work on cancer, and again, the amount it takes to simulate a couple of cells is the most powerful supercomputer in the world can't handle it. So you're not getting a like-for-like digital dog. You're getting kind of basic organ reactions and responses.
Yeah, and we can simulate C. elegans. We can do that, right? It's just like we can simulate nematodes. We can simulate single cell organisms. I think that is more or less, yeah, we kind of like more or less figured out. But yes, single cell organisms. That's what we're talking about.
Single cell organisms, and not even at like the highest possible resolution. It's still several
Right.
layers of magnitude lower resolution than like we'd ideally want if we're trying to work out how to create drugs and see if they make your head swell, or like what's all the crazy stuff people say COVID does to you, COVID vaccines.
It makes you magnetic. You attract
Makes you
spoons.
magnetic.
Yeah, it makes them
stuff.
impotent, doesn't it?
Oh, big
Thank
big
you, Nicki
cojones.
Minaj's cousin.
Yeah.
But no, I think the interesting thing about the challenge is that it's not just a research group doing it. Gilead, Eli Lilly, and I believe Bayer are involved. So that's 3 absolute titans getting involved on this, and that's a good sign because it shows that they're trying to realign their ways to be a little bit more inclusive or like kind of wholehearted. My only fear with this is that, okay, yeah, fantastic, they're saving some dogs, they're making dogs' lives a little bit better, so they're not,
And
they're
human
not
lives,
testing on-
hopefully.
Yeah, and human lives as well. My only fear is, okay, what about the cats you're using? What about the rats you're using? Obviously I'm not as big on animal testing as, say, someone who would go and protest with XR or whatever, but the fact that they're just doing with this one, okay, maybe, like you said, Max, baby steps, they're going to work on to maybe other animals 5 to 10 years down the line. That's my fear, is they're just focusing on one line, and I want to see this kind of branched out across, but obviously we've got to get this synthetic data problem. I like the idea of using single cell organisms. That's absolutely
Yeah, that will
hilarious.
change the problem. Yeah, but I do like. Do you know what? The one thing I like about this is that they're saying that, hey, we're not doing tests on dogs anymore, and our reaction is like, you were doing tests on dogs.
Yeah, exactly. The best,
Yeah.
for me, it was good because when I wrote the story for AIbusiness.com, plug, I got to pick cute dog pictures, and there are tons of them. That's the best thing about my day.
I mean, Elon Musk is operating on monkeys and pigs, but
Yeah,
No,
but
right.
but,
Yeah,
but the
exactly.
environmental crowd still loves him. Yeah.
Wait,
So-
he's operating on pigs. Boris Johnson has 125,000.
So obviously, this is one way AI can help with healthcare, but you guys have been constantly writing about a bunch of AI companies getting tons of money, saying we can like solve healthcare. Max, what do you think? How close are we to solving all ailments?
Well, the
and
thing
living
is,
forever?
yeah, we don't know, but basically there are a couple of companies that have been making waves. So for decades, I think, serious pharma research was dominated by a few big names, and just like we've heard some of them before, Bayer, kind of GSK, Novo Nordisk. But there is a whole generation of startups which are completely 100% AI driven, and this was their origin point, they're AI researchers rather than, pharma researchers. And it's just like some of these companies have figured out ways to look for new drugs very effectively. And one of them is, and sorry if I'm mangling this, Exscientia, which apparently means subconscious in Latin?
Consciousness.
Conscience. Okay. Consciousness. So they're a UK company. The legend is actually quite beautiful. You know, like it was kind of like the guy refined the ideas behind the startup on his way home from a research lab for many years. They're based in Wales, and they've just scored. They just went public on Nasdaq, which is like it's a big achievement for a small company from Wales, and raised 305 million directly, sort of like via their public offer, and another 160 million from the Vision Fund 2 and the Gates Foundation. And I mean, again, those are organizations very, very interested in healthcare. Masayoshi Son also wants to live forever, and Bill Gates does, definitely. And this is not Exscientia's first involvement with the Gates Foundation, so they've done it at least twice before, maybe more, where just like the foundation gives them a big chunk of money, usually kind of like more than like this. There was one deal worth 70 million to develop specific drugs. That 70 million was for COVID. So Exscientia is swimming with money. Everybody, they made everybody believe that, like AI is going to help us discover the next generation of drugs. They have 3 drugs entering early clinical trials, and one of them, interestingly, some of our viewers, listeners might be interested, is a drug for ADHD. And if you know the current crop of drugs for ADHD, it's essentially glorified speed. So yeah, not very good for you. It might make you focus better, but it might also make you a little bit of a kind of twitchy, crackheady, character.
Speedhead. Yeah.
I'll just pick up on that because we've been covering this for this company, and I can't Exscientia. I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. Really sorry, but I picked up on the Bill Gates work because it's not just COVID. They're also working on future pandemic response drugs. So not just COVID-19, but novel coronavirus generally as a whole. And they're also working on animal to human viruses, which at the current rate of deforestation and impact on the environment are more than likely to becoming a bigger problem in the next 50 to 100 years. Bill Gates, as we all know, is the man behind COVID. No, I'm joking. He obviously has been very vocal about the need for pandemic planning 5 years before the bloody thing happened. So he knows what he's doing on this, which is why, for me, rather than SoftBank investing, the Bill Gates actually taking the money onto this and investing is a big deal looking inward, because it shows that they actually might have something. But then we were discussing at the top of the pod, actually, to what extent is this actually going to work?
Yeah, so I mean, I have a preternatural distrust of investors. So Bill Gates Foundation, for example, has been involved in a lot of projects that have had a negative impact. So they did a circumcision drive in Africa that was meant to lower rates of AIDS, and it raised it, and they kept going. For example, and then the Vision Fund 2, which referencing earlier, is full of Saudi money. Obviously invested in WeWork, invested in Uber. These are complete failures of businesses that were built on a house of cards. And those were relatively simple businesses that you could have, a non-tech person could have looked at, gone through the books and gone, this bit makes sense, this bit doesn't. Holy hell, what do you mean? You're leasing spaces and then selling them to other people for less. That makes 0 sense. Whereas the difficulty with AI, and which is why we're going to see the new Theranoses of the AI generation around the corner, and I'm not specifically speaking about this company, please don't sue, but it is very, very hard, even if you are good at AI, to effectively communicate that to anyone.
Explain how it works. Yeah.
It's very hard to explain. It's very hard for an investor to know how much of that AI is actually AI, how much is contract workers manually doing stuff overseas, how much is AI that's just repackaged and resold. It's how much. There are a bunch of small startups that essentially resell Amazon and Microsoft Azure AI and make a nice healthy margin in between, and virtually do nothing other than change the interface, and they're just reselling, and it's an entire business, and they raise money from investors, and all they have to do is say cloud services, because cloud services is nice and vague. That's not a real company. There are going to be a whole bunch of these. I don't know about this one. I'm not saying anything specific. Feel free to invest. But one of these days, it's going to turn out a whole bunch of these are just complete bullshit.
Yes,
Our lawyers have asked me to read this statement.
but
to leave this
interestingly-
podcast at once to protect yourself. Ben.
I think there's gonna be a bit of international competition in the space as well, because drugs like chips are still very much a matter of national production and manufacturing, and an international cooperation, and it's a very kind of like it's a political subject. Like there's Indian manufacturers who can do things off label because it's a poor country and they can just print those drugs that everybody else has to pay for. Like that's just one example. But so what has happened in China just a month earlier is another company aspiring to do exactly the same things, AI for novel drug development, called XtalPi, closed Series D, 400 million.
And again, very stringent investor regulations and oversight there. Everyone knows. Very stringent.
Actually, a whole bunch of their investors were from the US.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So my question is, how do you measure success in this case?
Well, it's going to be when any of these drugs, basically the first AI discovered drug to be approved and to enter kind of what's widespread use. Not early clinical studies, but actually it's proven, it works, and I think we're going to see a real gold rush for these kind of companies, but we need proof. We haven't seen the proof yet. Like this, as far as they progressed is early clinical studies. And that's great, but that's not really kind of, that's a very far away from an actual drug.
So one of the most exciting and real physical things that come out of it was DeepMind's AlphaFold, and like Max said, that's an early thing. That's not leading to any actual drugs, and it won't for a very long time. But that was still a huge leap and a glimpse at what AI can bring to the healthcare industry. And DeepMind are having a good year, right, Max?
Well, sort of. Basically, DeepMind is an interesting company, but so it's a case study in how bleeding edge innovation does not pay the bills. So DeepMind was acquired by Google for a lot of money, and famously Google, Alphabet, sorry, have to get your corporate.
Hey, you told me off for that this week, so that's on you.
I'm sorry. Alphabet acquired DeepMind for a whole bunch of money and then wrote off 1.5 billion of their debt, and this is how this year DeepMind was able to proclaim that it made its first profit ever. A total of $62 million in plus. Which is great, which sounds great, but then you look at the actual work they've done and who paid the money, and who was it? Any guesses?
Was it Google / Alphabet?
It was Google. So basically,
that's amazing.
So Google paid
great content.
DeepMind for doing things like improving estimated arrival times on Google Maps, and enhancing Google Virtual Assistant, and improving battery saving features on Android. So they work, they're applying the AI know-how across a whole range of problems. It's kind of interesting because, it's kind of like jack of all trades, like whatever problem you want to solve, we can try to solve this. And they barely broke even.
But so it's internal counting, but and even on that, there's the big caveat of Google repeatedly does these press releases saying, "Oh, DeepMind has done X. It's made X, 5% more efficient, 20% more efficient, blah blah." There's no outside checking because it's them selling themselves. So in my field, which is I write about data centers. Back in 2016, they did a big thing saying DeepMind had reduced the PUE, which is an efficiency metric. So they've basically made data centers 15% more efficient. Huge news. That's a huge jump in the industry. I did some digging. It was one facility. It was over a short period. Another press release. Oh, we've released it to all the data centers. Did some digging? No. Oh, we're going to release it to the wider industry. It's going to be able to be working in power stations. It'll work in homes. It's just going to make everything more efficient. That was years ago. I did some digging. No, they haven't. Will they talk to me? No, they won't. 2016, still not really where they said it was in 2016. Really take these things with the biggest grain of salt you can get in these supply chain difficult times.
So if you just joined the podcast, this has been Seb's therapy. And,
you said this is uncut. You always cut my rant. Right?
I thought you just talk faster.
Yeah,
you didn't cut. You didn't make it shorter. You just talk faster.
The lawyers want us to cut the feed.
No, but I think.
I will just jump in here because you talk about AlphaFold, and I completely agree with you, Seb, on that. Like, data centers are a huge fucking problem when it comes to efficiency and energy. The only interesting thing about DeepMind for me personally is that they released AlphaFold 2 open source, which I never saw coming from an Alphabet-owned company. It's on GitHub. You can go and download the source codes now. Fantastic. And I think that a couple of maybe other players might turn around and use that source code for something else and might make a profit from it. I don't know. But the fact that they did that is kind of weird considering that they're not making it. It's like they're not making any money and they're chucking stuff off the ship.
and there is there is precedent for taking kind of like your open source aspirations and turning them into a massive commercial business like OpenAI did. So it's just like if they wanted to do that, they could do it. They could spin it up as a tool that you have to pay for, or a tool that is only available in Google Cloud, for example. That would
so forgive me for asking this question. So I don't know DeepMind that well, but at this point, are they just a bunch of fun nerds having a bunch of money and they're just playing around to see which ones stick? They're just throwing things at the wall.
It's a very difficult situation. So they sold themselves to Google, then they secretly tried to work out how to separate themselves from Google. They had one of their co-founders was highly abusive. They tried to get into healthcare, as we've seen. Did a partnership with the NHS that was probably illegal. Got fined for that, have a lot of controversy about what data they're collecting, but at the same time they have some of the greatest leeway in the AI corporate AI world. So it's a politically charged place, I think would be the safest way of putting it. There's a lot of yay, we can do whatever we want until Big Daddy Google pops in for a day, and then they have to check some boxes and pay the tithe.
But it's essentially it's just like DeepMind is its own moonshot factory. Google and then Alphabet, they always like Google X. They always like this idea that they're just like, okay, we're gonna sink a bunch of money, and it might not be very useful now, but 10 years down the line, oh yeah, this is where we cash out.
And guess what? And guess what? They have a lot of money to throw down the throw out the window.
Yes, but they've also been doing 10-year moonshots for more than 10 years. Name a moonshot that has been successful.
The one thing I kind of, and forgive me for not having like a more up to date analogy, and if you come up with one, go ahead. This reminds me of the early olden days of like when America, quote unquote, forged the West, right? It's the promise of gold. The promise of gold is there, and the idea that there could be gold, and there's somewhere there, we know there's gold, and we just have to go find it. But yet, it just so much money and effort are put in to find those gold. But actually, the people who are actually benefiting are the people who open hotels, are people who open like little garage here and there.
Cloud providers. That's why it's cloud providers. The biggest beneficiaries of this AI boom are cloud providers and NVIDIA.
Right. So you're impressed with the analogy, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's you did all right for a novice.
So what you're saying, Tien, is there's gold in them there hills.
There's gold in them there hills, but a lot of these AI companies have no gold and are either hoping they'll find gold after pretending they have gold for ages, or never plan on finding gold.
So I think that's my point. The hills have eyes, though. So the point of it is eventually somebody's gonna find gold, and after a lot of money and energy pour in, by this point we're on the early stage, so we don't know who's gonna come out on top yet. We're still at this point of we're spectators just watching money being thrown in to like team up and find something, up on the hills.
But
at this point,
give us some money.
I mean, Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, compared AI to the invention of fire, which is hilarious. It's not that extreme. Right?
When AI can cook me some delicious meat, then I believe it. Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, we had a .com boom. I'm sure like people who were actually around, they would have like very insightful commentary about what's happening with AI right now.
What followed?
Okay, so for AI Business Podcast, we don't really believe in AI or business.
Christ! The lawyers have said we've got to not turn up next week.
The reality is. Unlike crypto,
we're going home.
This is a real thing. There are real positive and negative, but real profound things that will come out of AI, come out of corporate AI, come out of healthcare AI, come out of all these things. But as a investor species, we do not have a way of benchmarking this in a way that's ever going to match the valuations these companies have. They are always going to be completely out of whack. And
Yes.
to assume that there's perpetual growth is ridiculous and silly. There's going to have to be some correction with some of these companies. It's hard to tell how big, how profound, how widespread it's going to be, but there are going to be a bunch of companies where it's going to realize all they do is either resell or sell snake oil, and they slap AI onto it. I mean, you guys talk to them all the time. You always talk to companies. You're like, okay, so you're an AI company. What AI do you do? How is this chatbot AI? How is this supply chain system AI? And there's just a kind of blinking of eyes, and then they explain something that's just a simple if this, then that.
Yeah. Or in the best case, there's some natural language kind of processing that's baked in that they didn't even develop, right?
Yeah.
So where can we find you, Tien?
So do follow us. And where can people find us, Max?
Yes, so mostly on Twitter at Max Smolaks, or every day on the website, or send me an email at max@aibusiness.com.
Yep, same with me. You can always find me on aibusiness.com, and you can follow me on Twitter talking about the new Battlefield beta for the next 2 days. So yeah.
Are they finally doing it?
Yeah, no, it's today. I'm gonna go early today.
And if you're a video game person, listen to the previous episode. We talk all about AI and video games. But yeah, if you want to find me, Twitter, Seb Moss, but shameless plug and relate to what we talked about is for the past 6 months I have been investigating how Google treats its contract workers at its data centers and the history of labor violations, low pay, crimes, horrible working conditions, robots that crush people, and all kinds of fun. If you want
60
to
minutes, Scott Pelley, if you're listening. Scott Pelley, please call him.
The magazine is free. It's only possible to be free if you subscribe. Please subscribe. It's not part of AI business. They are going to cut me off.
Yeah, the lawyers have said, can you leave, please?
This will be the only part I cut out, actually. Just your shameless plug. And you can find me not using Facebook or Instagram at TIENCHIFU. I'm kind of on Twitter. I don't know. You can find me. Are you guys off anytime soon, by the way? Like, I never asked you. We should have coordinated.
I will work until I die.
But
I have 22 and a half days.
I have like 4 weeks left. I don't know what to do.
We all do, but shout out myself.
You don't have
Max
4 weeks, Ben. Come on.
Are
I have
going,
22 and a half days.
Myself and Max are going to Silicon Valley first week of November for the AI Summit in Silicon Valley. I can't wait. I'm gonna buy a cowboy hat. You're gonna see me, and you'll see my legs for the first time. Yeah, you'll see how tiny I am in real life.